the faces behind the blinds. When you grow up carrying a label you never chose, it never truly leaves you. It becomes a small, constant weight lodged under your collarbone, an ache you learn to breathe around. For me, that label was visible the moment I stepped onto campus. I was different. The hijab, the quiet way I answered questions, the prayers tucked into my day between lectures. Most people treated me like anyone else. Some were kind, a few were curious, and then there were those who delighted in making my difference into their entertainment. It started as name-calling, cheap, sharp barbs tossed in crowded corridors where laughter followed like an echo. The worst of them were two brothers who made sport of cruelty. They trailed me through classes, smirked at my study group, and specialized in nicknames designed to make me flinch. There was a casualness to their cruelty, a viciousness that felt practiced and rehearsed. The town knew their surname, their family's infamy folded into every whispered hallway anecdote. Their parents were serving time for crimes the papers had printed in black and white. It was a private fact everyone treated as public spectacle, and somehow that only sharpened the brothers' insolence. They wanted to unsettle me, and they were good at it. I learned to keep my head down. When you're a target in a place that calls itself civil, you cultivate small courtesies like armor. Friends would step in now and then, firm voices, a hand on my shoulder, and I loved them for it. But the jabs continued, and so did the way my heart would retreat every time I heard their laugh ripple through a crowded room. Home was where I tried to recalibrate. The house on the edge of town was modest and steady. My parents' slow rituals, the soft hum of the late-night radio my mother insisted on, the comforting smell of cardamom and slow-cooked stew. Nights there were meant to be calm. Street lamps threw a tired amber through our blinds. The world outside would hush and pretend everything was ordinary. I liked those small, ordinary rituals. They made me feel whole. One such ordinary night, the quiet ruptured. I had stayed up later than usual, scrolling through notes and half-watching a documentary to soothe my buzzing mind. Midnight draped over the neighborhood like a velvet curtain. I lay on my bed beneath the idle ceiling fan, the faint orange spill of a streetlight scraping across the blinds. That's when I heard it, a soft, precise tapping at my window. Faint at first, like a branch brushing the glass, then deliberate. 3 quick knocks, patient and measured. My stomach dropped. There are noises you can rationalize. A truck's idling sound, a stray cat on the gutter. This was different. There was intent in those knocks, and attention paid to me. I told myself not to rise, to keep my door closed and wait for my parents to wake if anything worse happened. But curiosity and dread have a way of conspiring. I sat up, heart ricocheting inside my chest. Another knock. Closing this time. My breath hitched. Part of me fought the panic. Another part wanted proof. I padded to the window, palms damp, and eased the blinds up an inch. The figure that waited on the other side made my breath stop. A white-painted grin stretched across the face of the mask, pressed to my glass. The exaggerated mouth was painted too bright. The cheek rouge smeared into a permanent grin. Hollow black circles where eyes should be, but the hollows were not empty. Behind them were human eyes, watchful, bright with a cruel focus. The light from the street lamp painted the mask in a sick pallor. Standing just behind the masked one was another silhouette, broader, a shadow taller and slower, both ridiculous and terrible in the night. My legs went weak. Recognition moved faster than my fear. Jack and his brother, Faces that had once sneered over cafeteria trays and hallway lockers, now hidden, anonymous, monstrous. For all their childish performances of bravado on campus, they had always been cowardly in groups and cruel when the crowd egged them on. Now, they had crossed a line I hadn't thought them capable of crossing. They had come to my home. I screamed, a raw, animal sound that ripped out of me. It sounded enormous in the confined dark of my room. The masked head jerked back as if someone had shoved it. Footsteps skittered across the grass, 10 quick taps away and gone, swallowed by the night. My door burst open. My father filled the frame, his face a mapping of sudden alarm. My mother behind him, a blurred motion of worry. I could only point, teeth chattering. My parents swore and cursed, a flurry of questions tumbling into the air. My father yanked the blinds fully open and peered into the street. But the pavement was empty. No clown masks, no grinning mouths, only the soft whisper of leaves and the distant buzz of a car's tires. We called the police. Waiting stretched like taffy. Minutes became light years when the cruisers arrived, their flashing lights smeared across my bedroom walls. Officers moved through our yard with torches, their beams cutting a path across damp grass. One officer crouched where the masks had been, bending to inspect the ground. He reported faint footprints in the soil, impressions made by sneakers in the loose earth. It was the kind of detail that should stitch fear into something real, but the boys' faces were absent. No blood, no marks, no sign of physical intrusion. Their masks were gone, their presence evaporated like smoke. The next day, the police visited the brothers' address to ask questions. Nothing came of it. An alibi, a library receipt, the clockwork denials. They claimed to have been studying late. They had witnesses who would testify to their presence elsewhere. There were no bruises, no broken pains, nothing the law could use to hold them. The officer's expression was patient, but final. Without concrete evidence, they could only file the report and offer warnings. What remained was the residue of fear. You don't get used to someone standing outside your window in a midnight grin. The nights after that stretched taut with suspicion. I found myself jolting awake at the whisper of wind, each shadow a potential face. My parents tightened their routines, doors double-locked, porch lights left burning, a motion sensor installed near the hedges. My friends tried to be practical, offering rides and company until I could breathe easier. But the memories of the black holes where eyes should be, the arcade grin frozen on a painted mask, lodged into me like burrs. In the weeks that followed, the brothers avoided me, as if they had heeded a warning. They turned away in corridors, their laughter gone, their swagger replaced by silence. It was an odd peace. The harassment stopped, but so did their gaze. Where aggression once existed, there was now a carved-out absence. I held my breath anyway, wary, as if any complacency might invite their return. What unsettled me most was the way the town treated the episode. People said things to soothe, pranksters, teenagers being dramatic, attention-seeking. Others nervously glanced at the brother's family name, the way one checks for a bruise before asking a question. The truth is smaller and less satisfying than legend. Two men who once found entertainment in belittling a fellow student crossed a line that was part theater, part cruelty, and part something that wanted to frighten more than just an individual. The illegal world shrugged at the boundaries between a prank and a threat. The social world recalibrated in whispers. Time is a tricky healer. It blunts the acute edges but leaves the scars. It teaches you to measure a sound before you let your heart race. I stopped sleeping with the bedroom lamp on, though for a long while I left the television muted on in the next room. In daylight, my world felt stable again. Class, friends, coffee, and laughter. At night, the blinds were heavy and the locks deliberate. There is a lesson in living through the phantom of someone else's cruelty, an awkward wisdom that teaches you about boundaries and the brittle nature of public personas. People who perform bravado in crowds sometimes crave anonymity when the lights dim. The masks they wore that night were not simply clownish props. They were a literal rendering of the faces they held for the world. Performative, exaggerated, safe, when detached from responsibility. I never saw them again in any manner that mattered. The brothers graduated, drifted, or perhaps kept it to themselves. They avoided me, and in return the world resumed its softer rhythms. I still remember the hollow eyes behind the painted black sockets, and the way the grin dug into the glass. The memory presses like a thumb against an old bruise. There, not gone. A reminder that safety is both a state and a practice. Locks, lights, community, and the stubborn refusal to let someone else define your fear. Sometimes I think of that night and realize the real wound wasn't the knock or the mask. It was the clarity of intent, the realization that cruelty is often a choice people make for sport, and that choosing to mark someone as different can escalate quietly into other, more dangerous acts. The courage in the aftermath was quiet too, telling the story, letting the officers note the footprints, letting friends stand guard when the dark felt too near. Little by little, the ordinary reclaimed its space. The weighing label under my collarbone lightened, not fully gone, but manageable. A part of me that taught vigilance without hardening my heart. And now, on nights when the wind pushes the leaves hard enough to make the window shiver, I check the locks, draw the blinds tight, and breathe. The street outside is mostly ordinary again. The clowns are memories folded into the town's long list of small cruelties, and I have learned to live beyond them, cautious, alert, and quietly whole.